Would you have seen much of Ryan, Joe, in your last year or so?
Ryan Beard?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I saw quite a bit of him. Obviously, I always took a real interest in the under-20s, and would always have a couple of meetings with Noel McNamara during the season when he was obviously he was 20s coach, and we'd have a couple of trainings with the under-20s, which always kind of got very edgy. I remember Andrew Porter having a bit of a dust up with Johnny at one stage. He wasn't taking a step backwards, and well, to be fair, he's built not to take a step backwards anyway, but Johnny doesn't either. So, you know, a lot of those 20s, the likes of Hugo, Jordan, even a few years ago when I was coaching, those guys had come in and trained with us long before they were involved with the actual Irish squad. You know, Will Connors, guys who are playing today, a whole bunch of them would come out and train with us. So you got to know them anyway. I got to know a lot of them through Tim, obviously. Tim played with a lot of them in the Leinster age groups from 16s through to 19s and Leinster schoolboys. So kids like James Ryan, who came through, they were the same level as Tim. Even though he's a year younger, he was twice the size.
Yeah, it's great to see the development, and I think the work being put in all schools and all clubs with all players over the last number of years has shown fruition through to the provincial sides, even with the performances of Connacht with a lot of young guys. There's a lot of West Corkians now making it in Munster squads and stuff like that. So that things are going well at that end of things. Gerry, you were at World Cup in South Africa. Was that your last gig with the Irish team?
Oh yeah, that was the last time. Yeah, 1995.
And you went back then with your first year with Terenure in 1996 on tour, and I think you were quoted saying that the professional of the Terenure side was way above the professional of the Irish side at the time. Is that true?
Absolutely true. Absolutely.
Like it was
fantastic.
Yeah, I believe it was it the Blues restaurant or training ground where everything happened, was it?
No, that's completely wrong. We spent all day trained all the time, all day.
Yeah.
It was only Terenure could bring, I think we played 4 matches, but we brought 75 people on tour, which was quite entertaining.
And many of them were able to play.
Yeah, most of them played fairly heavily, but some of them on the pitch.
And you enjoyed your stint in Terenure, no doubt.
My stint in Terenure, I was invited to help Des Thornton for 5 weeks in August. 5 weeks in August, or 4 weeks in August. And I stayed for 5 weeks, and then I stayed for 5 years. So there's somebody in Terenure, their maths isn't fucking great, I can tell you that now.
They had something on you that you had to just hang around.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah.
And would you, obviously in your role in Leinster, you would have seen a lot of these young guys coming through the system. Would you have earmarked many of those in your day, or had a close eye on a number of those guys?
You know, Leinster, it's interesting listening to Brian there, that 10 years ago, Michael said 1 person in the squads. So it doesn't happen overnight, and they now have 10 or 11. The thing about the Leinster, the important part about Leinster is that it's about as many people as possible for as long as possible to be as good as possible. And if we go down this road of specialization at 14 and 15 and 16, we're wasting our time. And sadly, in the laws or the powers that be in this island don't understand that, and it's a complete and utter shambles and waste of time. And Joe was very keen, was fantastic help to everybody in Leinster. I'm not talking about professionals, I'm talking about the kids who played. And mentioning the under-20s, we're now in a situation where we don't actually have an under-20s competition, so you can work that out. And that's down specifically to what's going on, and that's crazy. And we've got to keep as many people playing the game for as long as we possibly can. And, you know, Brian O'Driscoll wasn't a superstar in school, ever. Gary Ringrose wasn't a superstar in school. There have been superstars, and obviously James Ryan was one of them. But there are loads of kids who just play, and we need to just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think that the ethos within clubs and within schools is to keep everyone playing. And I think we just have to make sure that we make that point, because I think particularly Irish sports people in any sport, even jockeys or whatever you want, they're not, the majority of them are dual sports kids. They play a number of sports when they're growing up, and getting a feel for Gaelic, getting a feel for golf and stuff like that.
The important thing, hugely important, that 99.9% of kids start playing rugby in Ireland in mini rugby and clubs and a bit in primary school, right? And the important thing in player development is that they play as many sports as they possibly can and enjoy themselves. And this taking kids out and putting them into special things is crap. It's rubbish. Unfortunately, Leinster don't do that, or try very hard not to do it. And that's why there are so many good players in Leinster. Very straightforward.
And would the system down in New Zealand be quite similar to what's up this end of the country, Joe, this end of the world?
Yeah, it is, Moggy. I think kids are actually really encouraged to play dual sports, maybe three sports without making too much of a hassle on parents who have to deliver them everywhere. But and a lot of studies have been done around kids playing multi-sports and specialising late and being better at their chosen sport because they've played a number of different sports. They get a different appreciation for space or timing, or even the appreciation of what other people have to do to make sure that the team functions as cohesively as possible. So kids tend to play tennis and do athletics and play cricket in the summer, and then rugby is obviously big, but so is basketball, and even rugby league in New Zealand has in some schools is very strong. So there is still competition for the athletes. I think you mentioned golf, a few of those individual sports, like even kids training for triathlon. There's a lot of paddling and rowing. The biggest sporting event in secondary schools in New Zealand is the Māori Cup, which is the big rowing regatta for national secondary school supremacy. So, it's not all about one sport. It is very much a multi-sport approach.
Yeah, and I think it's very important, and Gerry raised it, that's what we continue to do in this country. And I think the soul of rugby and the soul of a sport in Ireland is through the clubs, is through the schools, and having kids playing everything and enjoying themselves, because they're, taking guys, I do agree with it. And there is a competition between sports, which sometimes isn't healthy. And I think if we let every kid play and find a sport, they will always come through at the top. And the likes of a Hugo Keenan and a Brian O'Driscoll, if we go down this picking guys out from a young age, they'll probably not make it in this country, and I'd be very sad to see. So it's up to us all to make sure that what's happening, or what has happened, is improved on, and that there isn't a structure put in place where kids are taken into academies from a very young age, because that type of thing is like a little bit like professional soccer, where they can pick loads of people. They only want one of them to make it, and they ruin a lot of people's, not only their sporting careers, but their life in general. And I think it's very important that rugby doesn't do that with any kid, that promises them a hell of a lot from a young age, and then other kids are turned away from the sport because they're not within these elite academies from a young age. So I think it's something we should be keeping an eye on. And I do believe within Leinster and with all provinces that, what we're doing works. We need to make it better, and we need to make it more fun, because there's one thing that we all need now this time is a bit of fun, and watching kids get back out in pitches will be great to see, hopefully over the next couple of weeks. So yes, go on, Joe. Sorry.
It's one of the luxuries here. I was at a tournament with 18 rugby teams, senior men's rugby teams in the Maris Spillane Cup tournament this weekend. And those guys, there was a sprinkling of NPC players, but a lot of those guys, it was very competitive. but a lot of those guys only want to play socially. And I think we've really got to make sure that we encourage all clubs to have enough teams that everyone can get a game and enjoy a game at their level. They have age and weight grades in Auckland because there's such a big population and some very big men. So having that balance as well, trying to make sure that we cater for everyone, not just the elite player.
Yeah. And moving on to the English game at the weekend, and in particular your experiences with playing England. I believe, Brian, your first cap was against England, coming off the bench against England in a fairly close one, was it?
I think Irish rugby, I think it was 1997 I got my first cap. It was slightly different from Irish rugby as we know it today. It was well, it was wild. I think we were 24-6 down and it was brought on for the last 15 minutes with the attitude, try to speed up the game. And looking back in reflection, the team were shattered. Like we weren't fit enough back then. We didn't have strength and depth. So I ran on for like a crazy 5 minutes to maybe 10 or 15 good passes. And then we ended up losing 45-6. So it wasn't the most auspicious introduction. And probably the worst part about it, back in those days, this is my main recollection of my first cap, to be honest. It's kind of embarrassing almost. You'd get your cap at the end of the speeches. So the tradition was there was 10 players per table, 5 English, five Irish, and each one would have to buy you a drink before the speeches. So by the time the speeches came around, and my name was called up, would Brian O'Meara like to come up and collect his cap and get the famous photograph? I was in bed getting sick. So I didn't even get to collect my first cap. I think I got it in a plastic bag maybe 6 months later.
I think that's when
So
Christian...
wasn't the greatest first day of my life.
I think that's where Christian Warner stepped in and got the cap for you, I think, Brian. And that's where we got the picture from, I think, you see.
I think I had to lie to my parents. But even then, the following week, I started against Scotland. And back then, there was 5 Irish selectors. And they went to watch myself and somebody called Steve McGarver play against... I was playing for Cork On. He played against... he was playing for Garryowen. We played probably one of the worst matches you've ever seen in a mud bath in Garryowen. And somehow 5 selectors picked me. I'd barely played an AL match up to this stage. I'd no experience. I'd no provincial success. So I was like, geez, they really didn't have a duty of care to bring players in like they do now, with a bit more cohesion, a bit more planning, a bit more structure. I was thrown in at the deep end. I was 19, 20. I had no experience, especially of trying to win games when you're under pressure. How do you slow down games? How do you deal with injuries, successes? So it was... I got picked when I didn't deserve to get picked. And when I deserved to get picked, I never got picked. So that was kind of my professional career in terms of Irish success.
When in Leinster itself, the one you were playing there, you had some very good success and you had a very good career in Leinster, which you enjoyed. Did your paths cross with Gerry?
Gerry coached me, I think, briefly. One year when he was in with Declan Kidney, he may have been in. Is that right, Gerry?
Yeah, the extraordinary... train of events, because I had never coached a professional team in my life, nor had any particularly desire to coach a professional team. And Declan rang me, and I would have been an old friend of, well, still am a friend of Declan's. And we were sitting in my back garden, and knowing, if you know Declan, it takes some time to get around to the point he's trying to make. So we were sitting in the back garden, and it was a nice sunny morning, thanks be to God, having a cup of coffee. And I eventually said to him, Declan, what exactly do you want? What are you doing here? And he said, I want you to help me coach the Leinster team. So it was somewhat taken aback, I'd have to tell you. But yes, and it was fantastic that from a coaching point of view, and somebody coming in like myself, completely from the outside, I had nothing to do with Leinster since the game went professional. And the players, including yourself, Brian, were fantastic and absolutely. And we did actually quite well, and we topped our group in the Heineken, and unfortunately we played the 12th team, which were bloody Leicester, and they beat us in Lansdowne Road. And that particular weekend, Declan decided he was going back to Munster, which wasn't the most sort of auspicious time to say you were going back to Munster, and there was absolute mayhem for a few weeks. But it was an interesting experience, I'd have to say.
And going back to your days coaching Ireland, you had 2 very great successes against the old enemy in 93 and 94. That be correct?
Yeah, we did. I would say as a team, we had a very good side actually, but well, eventually, we probably underperformed to a certain extent. We played well against England twice. Yeah. We hadn't been playing. When I took over, we hadn't won a match for I think 10 games or something like that, and then we lost the first one. We played like awful rubbish. And then we gradually improved and we beat Wales in Wales. And then the last game was against England in Leinster Road. And my abiding memory of the game was we played very, very well. But it was, and both Brian and Joe would understand this. This is in the amateur days when the first thing you did against England was cause havoc in any way that you possibly could. And we had a team which were very highly selective in how they could cause havoc and manage to cause havoc and play very well and put the havoc into a good, into a good space. So my abiding memory of the game was we won it very comfortably. We won it 17-0 or 17-3 or something. Mick Galway scored a try at the Lansdowne end, on the left-hand side, just in front of the old Lansdowne tea room. And there's a great video sequence of it was a good try. It was an offload. He galloped over, surrounded by a few people, and the place went bananas. And there's a great shot of the crowd storming onto the pitch, and leading the charge is a young lady, absolutely beat everybody by a couple of yards to Galway, and gave him a big hug and a big kiss, and it was his sister. And this is absolutely framed in the legend that the only person who laid a hand on Galway in the match was actually his sister. So that's what happened.